Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for your Commander-in-Chief here in Abbotsford. And the first thing we're going to do for Abbotsford, for residents and families, is to get the R.C.M.P into Abbotsford and take it over and remove the organized crime in the buddy system. Abbotsford Police were into high elite organized crime. With the proof that we had as residents and myself from Henry's own son, Darren Brown, could open the door that nobody could block it, use social media or their advertising or say, wait a minute, we're going to have an investigation internally, back off. This one was long overdue. The attacks on politicians that stood up for their community wasn't about another person getting a seat, it was about greed. And was ran all and controlled by Henry Brown, his establishment, and the threats on people's lives were for the official community plan, which was bigger than meth labs of Abbotsford. When the Abbotsford Police started failing protocol and procedures and eyewitnesses, it wasn't that they were failing, they were deliberately doing it to hold off scandals on Henry Brown, criminal charges, and bring it forward to the general public because it meant they had to be removed. They figured that they would take the low road and go in the gutter, and with under the name All the Man could save the company, and we'll get rid of Mike Sear, we'll clean the top, and that wasn't enough. It was the man that Henry had the phone numbers to in the Abbotsford Police. So let me tell you, when Keelan Olenoff went to Henry's house and said that Henry had millions of dollars and there was break-ins, in my opinion, he was running and busting people off the street and taking the money to Henry's safe. That was wrong. It was a lie. There was never no break-ins in the mayor's house up on Downs, period. When the R.C.M.P, we went over to Mission, asked me, Mr. Pelican, we want you to do us a favor. I said, guaranteed, guys, what is it? We want you to pull down your videos of everybody's houses that you put up, showing where they were. Mike DeYoung's, Ed Fast, Henry Brown's, and everywhere. There's innocent people in them houses behind these guys' back, and we need you to do it. And that was honored and done. I stood forward as a politician, I want to say, with Abbotsford and the thanks of the R.C.M.P to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, what was taking place in Abbotsford for the city. When the Abbotsford Police picked up a prostitute down in front of my job site when they were running a beat down on me and ran through town in their cop cars and everything, the Safety Standards Act didn't stand up to talk to witness or nothing. It was a buddy-buddy system. They dumped all the cars and bought new ones to get rid of all the stuff that was laying on the seat from the officer and that prostitute. This is a company. When the Abbotsford Police went on Canada Day behind the building on your time cards and double time to throw a lavish party and rip the community off was unbelievable for hours and hours. When the Abbotsford Police used the excuse to go on the CP track and run up your time card behind taxpayers' dollars and everybody else, it was unbelievable because it's the CP's job. When the Abbotsford Police raced our Dodge Chargers in the middle of the winter and we're fleeing around like kids with no chain tires and snows, and they go after people in Talia, this was out of control. When the Abbotsford Police used the task force to go after Councillor Mogill, ordered through Mike Sear from Henry Brown to block Mogill in the election so Henry could own it, was out of control. When the Abbotsford Police went on top of our bomb squads and did push-ups in our community vans and were brutalizing our community on your time cards, tax dollars, and having fun on community vehicles, they didn't consider it was horseplay. The WCB took a different look to it. It was just children running the police department. None of them were capable of doing any work. When the Abbotsford Police went after a South Asian young kid in Yale Secondary and said because he was black he wasn't allowed in the park and there was no reprimanding. It wasn't. The Abbotsford Police were being here in Abbotsford as a racist, extremely racist group under Henry Brown, and it needed to stop. And it needed to come to an open. When Henry Brown knew that this was going to become public, he was shitting his bricks. He got in his car and he came out after me in a protest and tried to end my life. When the Abbotsford Police covered it up and knew that Henry fled from the scene, wouldn't charge Henry, and they were doing damage control to save the company, I believe right there and then she was coming to a head that it was going to end. The Abbotsford Police have no choice, none at all, because they know they have to be removed, these disgusting men that have upstairs that have a duty to do that paperwork if we're failing. They knew that now to get rid of the problem was to start to beat me up and chase me. They had no idea who was behind me. The John Rust out of the BC Conservatives in our houses, the Premier Bill Vandersem, and many dignitaries that have a lot of money that can be sued for making false statements. The Abbotsford Police weren't going to stop. Under Henry's elite mob, they were going to run roughshod, and it needed to come to an end. When the Abbotsford Police knew Mike DeYoung threw an illegal party with drugs and alcohol at the height of the coronavirus to endorse Dave Sadu, when they were going after young kids at the trampoline and kick them out. It wasn't ending. When the Abbotsford Police pulled their filters out of their masks at the hospital because of the steroids and bum and shit. But what was supposed to take place is the door is supposed to be open for residents to go upstairs and get investigations on what officers were making threats. Gertie Purdy's threat went too far. You cannot remove protest at all. You need a court. You need a court. When the people are protesting in a convoy and at the city, on the highway where they can throw stuff off, the Abbotsford Police, Gertie Purdy didn't go throw them. Henry Brown ordered them. When I came into town to do podcasts to help Suk Mangill, because I knew Henry was trying to load Mike DeYoung to get him in for all this to be squashed, the Abbotsford Police came across the parking lot, smashed my camera and made false accusations that he was in town. He had enough evidence to jail me. I knew right there and then I have to go full tilt with Abbotsford at the whole company. No mercy, no sympathy, no uniform, no I'm up and important. The full tilt because you're framing people in your line. Protocol wasn't followed because I gave him an open invitation to go to the multi-billionaire in White Rock and remove him. Colin Watts packed his shit and he went running over to the Chamber of Commerce, Alex Mitchell, to throw a party. What are I doing here? You saw the videos that I have let go on the internal fighting in Abbotsford, from the Chamber of Commerce, from Mission City Councils, from Chilliwack City Councils, to the Tourism Board, to everything. And the conflict of interest was unbelievable. Henry's son being the Economic Development Officer, it was an elite group of a ring of people. But the South Asians were being beat down and attacked unbelievable by this white establishment, and they needed to come to an end. When you walked into the city that hold above this police department, and then Henry was blocking open mic and everything. This was about development and everything. When I knew Henry was stealing the $84 million, and Darren Brown knew that you could retrofit the building and put it on top. It was about getting a job to get kickbacks and his friends. When I saw Henry doing what he did with Ron Funk, and Ron Funk running Ross, I knew a developer can't run city councils and mayor because now they own perks. When I saw Henry lobbying all the jobs for Ron Funk, special effort treatment and everything else, I knew this was a mob, but how deep was it tied? It flushed itself to the top thanks to the R.C.M.P. Ed Fast, Mike DeYoung, and you could see him. All five of them had to throw in to get behind Mike DeYoung and support, flushing themselves to the top. This was about development. This was about a meth lab that was so big and everything, but it was about establishment run under police uniform. This is why I lobby strong for the Abbotsford Police to be removed, the man not to be sent out in Surrey or anything else. This ain't about now we need investigations, inquiries. It's about removing the whole team on it. I could just go on and on of what they did. But the disgusting acts paint a picture. There's no leadership, there's no responsibility, there's nothing. And it needed to end, and it needed to assure the general public or anybody showing anything that you misbehaved or anything else, you have to go under inquiries, especially on that level of magnitude. What am I doing here? Let me tell you, last night was a Christmas tree lighting. And it's put on by the Downtown Business Association, DDB. The Business Association, and it's put on there. The Business Association is supposed to represent small businesses. It takes $3,000 off of people's taxes, out of your taxes, off of them businesses, to promote businesses down there, and it doesn't do nothing. Dick shit, you might say, dick shit. It doesn't do nothing. And it stole that money. But last night, let me tell you what happened. There were the fencing and everything to secure the general public wasn't there. But that business association had one police officer down there. They didn't secure the general public from the homeless, the attacks, or anything else. And old Watts brought some mangy old German Shepherd dog there to be patted and everything else because the police can't pull its name up. They're running around hiding everywhere. And now they're gonna lean, R.C.M.P, please, it's attack on our company, attack, it ain't. You cannot have the R.C.M.P stand beside this shit. You can't have Surrey stand beside it because it'll wreck them companies. And them companies are too important for our law enforcement and our justice system. This is a bunch of garbage shit and everybody could see it. Attacks on residents, videos that outline the attacks, and this needed to, there's no professional. It's a bunch of losers realizing we're going to be canned, we're going to be humiliated, we're going to go from a $200,000 paycheck to laying on the street, and we're going to be asking Mr. Pelican to beg David Eby when he's the mayor to build us homeless shelters, and everything's got to be turned over. When Simon Gibson said that I suspect everybody's phone's tapped, and Simon went on the world stage saying Pierre Poilievre should endorse Mike DeYoung. That's how bad they wanted Mike in so Mike could squash it. The scandal on Souk Mangel was out. These things show yourself that what was taking place by this establishment. But to assure the general public of their safety wasn't being done. To assure the general public that Henry wasn't a threat to any resident, it was the R.C.M.P said, guard yourself now. We don't know if Henry's got guns, he's going to retaliate, who's on his payroll and anything else. Henry was that desperate to scandal everybody, to grab that city, because he knew what I knew, the official community plan, if you could design it your way, which he worked his ass off to push it through for his friends blocking Augustine. You saw the Cooper's Farm, he had to say no to them, 3,000 people, and he used this mob like Adolf Hitler, the Abbotsford police. This police company begged and begged and begged and begged that it's about drugs and gangs and families and drugs and gangs. It didn't have anything. It's a bunch of shithole men that can't run nothing. They can't even go and pull their pants up after they're gone to the washroom. And nobody should make any words to make this company look good, but to beat it in the ground, because that's how you get responsibility. It didn't do none of it. It figured that Abbotsford residents weren't big enough to get lawsuits to sue it, to put it in the ground. It wasn't. It needed the right people and it needed politicians. And I want to say, thanks to Bill Vanderzam, MPs and everybody, John Rustad, they came in and they sat with the community, and not to pull this shit out of the bag again and again and again. They have to be gone. They've got too close to the community. Nobody knows how many people they've been framed. Everybody will come forward to the station. So why? Why did I talk about the Downtown Business Association? Well, let me tell you why. When Darren Brown showed me as an economic development officer, Henry wanted to squish the ag fair. It gets so much money from the Abbotsford City to keep it going. To bankrupt it, this is a smart businessman, to bankrupt it, Henry then made sure that its funding it got, it had to pay to these losers to police the event when they got their own security. They got fences. They do a good job. They check you at the gate and everything else. They got ambulance in case anybody falls and everything else. But they had to go in and bankrupt it. But the Downtown Business Association, if you put a Christmas tree up your backside and you do this, you fraud the business of $3,000 on taxes, and you're supposed to advertise and did none. Where was Alex Mitchell? Why did I learn this? How did I learn this? Patricia Dreesen's pretty upset that she got tossed and she's being hauled out for Archway Community Services and the stuff she did. And I told you, when you go into the city, make sure you're kind of like a Les Barkman. You go out, you do your job as a city councillor, you have a time card that you went out on all the jobs, and you just don't go and show up on Monday and pass decisions. It was bargaining chips. Bargaining. If you don't do what I do, Dreesen, and say you passed the job site on Valley Road and this, I'll have Vicky Hopes scandal you. Vicky Hopes and Abbotsford News were the scandalists to put stuff on people. Us people, myself included, I told you, with the training from Wall Financial, and I told you from Aquilini, Mike Dakota, from Vantana, and above all, Ani, Mike Dakota. A wonderful man. I could defend my community over this shit and drag them out on their head, and I don't care if you're in bulletproof vest, if you got your gun, you got your badge, you got anything, you're a failure to this community, and no other police force needs to come in here and prop you up with advertising anything. They need to look at it and say the shit you did should have stopped out the door when Henry got in that car and charged him. That would have stopped all the other stuff Henry needed to do with the task force, the threats through the election, and everything else. The shit that these guys come up with every day. Well, we're going to have a special investigation team come in and look what went wrong. They can't even stand here and defend their own company and their own guys. That is why they got no no leadership in this community. Their heads are down, they're running around, they got nothing. The guys up the top were on a free ride. Donna Macy was calling the shots. People were getting phone calls and being threatened. And it wasn't about gangs. It wasn't about Fountainal. It was the Abbotsford Police. We're doing it all in the town. And that is why I could tell you there was great men like Dix and Kearns, but I cannot look away from the abuse they did, the protocol they didn't follow, and the procedure they did. And Watts then steals this $83 million through Unitech, then asks for the cost overruns and everything else, and you're going to award Unitech, and they had no experience doing. You hold the developer responsible for anything. But let me tell you, and then scandal poor Suk Mangala. When I told Pierre Poilievre, I'll be there for your candidates and I'll defend it. You even see me defend David Eby. This is about a community. This is about a resident, and this wasn't. This was about an elite, rich man that found back doors, and their mouths went in and robbed the casinos. So to the Downtown Business Association, I think that you should be standing beside me and saying that the Agri-Fair needs to have all its money that these guys ripped off for their bras for their wives and their new underwears and their slinky toys they were buying when they pick up prostitutes, all paid back, because it's a wrong way to do it. And as mayor, you would have to stand here and call it out. And that little Christmas tree he was lighting was a bunch of shit. The Blueberry Festival, it's a bunch of shit. When everybody else puts a private event on, they gotta pay these guys. And when they do it, they get away with it. No more two-tier systems, one only. And the way we stop this, ladies and gentlemen, the way we stop it is bring the R.C.M.P in to run roughshod back on Abbotsford to get it in control, because the politicians are cutting each other's throat. I'm live, Abbotsford A.P.D.